Okay, we should be live. Please comment in the chat if you can hear me and if this live stream is working. Let me know how the sound is. We are going to be trying to not have any tech issues like we did last time. It was quite frustrating, but I think that we got most of that worked out. This is going to be an interesting one. We are going to go over the congressional hearing that happened, I believe, last week on UFOs or UAPs or NHIs, non-human intelligence, or whatever you want to call them. Ultra-terrestrials, extraterrestrials, who knows. But there was a congressional hearing on the matter. It was actually very good, and it was much more interesting than I was expecting. Not because much new was said if you're following this topic over the last few years, but because of the fact that it was said in Congress. And there are certain aspects of this topic that were brought up in the hearing that are not that have not really been brought up in the halls of the institutions quite yet in this conversation, specifically regarding crash retrievals and reverse engineering programs, which are much more interesting and much closer to quote unquote disclosure, if that is the focus, than just unexplained anomalies in the sky, which there are a lot of them. I've filmed one. I've talked about it on here. I've showed it on here. I've posted the video. It's on this channel. Doesn't do it justice because anytime you try and film a light in the sky, it's not going to look the way that it does in person. It's much less dramatic, but it still nonetheless does display properties in the video the more you examine it that are completely strange. I mean, they're just unlike anything that I've ever seen, or that is you would expect from a conventional craft, at least. So, but even videos like that, they are largely just ignored by people because it's a video and it's not as profound as seeing something in person because of the nature of filming something in the sky always. But that in and of itself doesn't tell us much about what is creating that light in the sky. And this hearing was much more about that and what we could know about it, what is being hidden from the American people, what's being hidden from the American government, at least the mainstream American government, on the matter. And it was very interesting to see some of the questions that were asked. Huge hats off to everybody who was involved, for the most part, in this hearing, on both sides of politics. To see them come together on something was pretty odd, to be quite honest. And it was an encouraging thing, but I'm not sure it will extend beyond this topic. But it's good to see it in this topic. But I will also say that if I'm taking these three men who are interviewed by Congress in this hearing at their word, and assuming that they are honest, they deserve quite a bit of credit for coming forward. If you can't examine this type of stuff if you don't think that people are being honest. If you don't think that people are being honest, then ignore it. It's not worth your time to try and debunk people who you think are liars. Just ignore it. You have much better things to do. So that is what we're going to be discussing today. We are going to be sharing the stream or using the stream that came from Chris Leto's channel. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. But I like Chris. I spoke to him on Kirchai Mungel's Tonanza briefly at the beginning of the year or at the end of last year. And he has a very interesting channel. I highly recommend that you subscribe. The link is down below. Also, I did not put the link below, but I will put the link below after this stream. I did an interview with the Memes of Destruction yesterday on sentient singularity theory, and that was awesome. That was a very, very good discussion. It is on his channel right now, and I will link it below in the description after we're done with the stream today. But I highly recommend watching it. It was great. I think he's got a lot of interesting things going on that channel. I think, and it's just cool to see a community of people interacting with physics or metaphysics and getting involved in these discussions who don't have a formal background in it. I'm one of them, and it's just cool to see. So it was a very fun discussion, and I like I said, highly recommend checking it out. So with that, please comment in the chat how everything sounds, any questions that you have. Super chats are open. They are greatly appreciated. Lately, we have been getting a lot of activity in the chats, and because of that, it has actually made it difficult for me to read everybody's question. If you really want me to see it, you can add a super chat, or you can tag me in it, and hopefully I see it then. But super chats are appreciated, like I said. So with that, hit the like button. Really helps fuel the algorithm, and we will get started. So I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I have had personal experiences, one of which I've talked about, and that is the one that I think is relevant greatly on here, the one that I filmed, and that's I tried to film something once that I saw basically like a helicopter and like above I don't know, like the LA area chasing, it seemed, and it seemed to be a similar type of object, and by the time I pulled my phone out to look at it, it had disappeared, and it was very odd. But it wasn't as profound as the video that I have posted on the channel. So you're welcome to look at it. We might look at it here. I have reviewed it quite a bit on other streams about UFOs, and you do have to kind of break it down and know where we are in order to see that it's jumping basically from spot to spot. Miles. It's jumping miles in seconds is what it is doing, and but it appears stationary the entire time. It is the strangest thing, and that is what is profound about it. If you just look at the light, you're not going to be like, that's profound, but you can see that it jumps. Basically, it doesn't. You can almost not even see though that it jumps. It's just that it's there, and then it's not, and then it's over 10 miles down the road, and that is something that I've never seen before. That like I said, a couple weeks later, it looked like there was another one once, but it was so brief that I saw it. But it was odd that there was a police helicopter that was basically checking it out, and I could only imagine if it was something unconventional. I could only imagine what it must have been like to be in that police helicopter and be that close to that thing, this giant glowing ball of light in the sky, and then have it just disappear right in front of you. It must have been very odd, but it was, like I said, so brief. It might not have been exactly the same thing, but it looked like it. But there are people that have had all kinds of sightings of all kinds of things, and a lot of them are corroborated by multiple people, including mine. There are other videos from the same exact day of other people filming in LA the same phenomenon that I filmed. So it was multiple people who thought that it was something weird, this has been going on for decades and decades and decades, and the United States government has in the past set up programs like Project Blue Book, which was a task force, kind of like the Arrow program in the Pentagon or the ATIP program, which preceded it, to look into unidentified aerial phenomenon, UFOs, unidentified flying objects, whatever you want to call it, and investigate them. And none of it has ever provided any kind of conclusions about anything, other than a lot of these are explained by conventional, instances that were just mistaken. That doesn't explain any of the ones that aren't, though. And it was funny. I saw this this tweet by Michael Shermer today, and I wanted to share it. This is, he says, in this clip where he's talking to some people, forgot everybody's name, but one of them is a filmmaker on, I think James Fox is a filmmaker on a UFO documentary. This looks like Destiny, and I don't know this guy and this guy. But they were discussing, and Michael Shermer is saying that, many of these are explained by normal phenomenon. And if you listen to Scott Kelly, who was an astronaut, he talks about how he saw things that looked like, vehicles, but then ended up not being vehicles from the International Space Station, which that doesn't actually answer anything. It just means people see things and they make mistakes about what they see. Well, newsflash, that's not a newsflash at all. Everybody knows that. So, but basically, the James Fox states, we don't care about those ones. We care about the Tic Tac incident, which we're going to hear testimony from today. We care about these other incidents where there isn't a conventional explanation that people are able to figure out and through investigation. And so his statement when he shared this was that Leslie Keene, who wrote, I think she wrote the New York Times story a few years ago about the ATIP program, wrote that 90 to 95% of UAP sightings are explained, essentially. So he's saying the entire alien belief depends on 5 to 10% of it unexplained anomalies. None of this matters to the discussion at all. None of it. It doesn't mean that the Tic Tac sighting wasn't something that was some unconventional vehicle of some type. It doesn't matter who made it. That's not the point right now. The point is that it's not a balloon floating over the ocean, and or it's not condensation on the glass of the International Space Station or something like that. So it's very interesting to me to see this kind of thing happen in these discussions. And what it is, and I've talked about this before on here because it's very relevant to my work, is it's people who don't know how to think. And all of us make mistakes in thinking. I'm not saying he doesn't know how to think at all. I'm saying that I actually don't mind Michael Shermer, even though I disagree with the entire ideology of skepticism is not thinking, is what it is. But to see this type of these types of answers to these discussions is not coherent to what the goal is in the actual discussion, which oftentimes debunking certain sightings or explaining certain sightings of unidentified phenomenon in the sky is used to discredit the idea that there is some non-human intelligence that is technologically capable that is actually around. And that's the actual question that we're trying to get at here. Is there another technologically capable group of beings that exists around us and is flying around in our skies and diving through the water, it seems now, under the oceans or wherever they are? They seem to be everywhere. Is that a technologically advanced species or group of beings? Doesn't matter where they're from. And we have so much disinformation, misinformation, and also a bunch of feelings in this topic, I've noticed, because you have a lot of people who, on one side, they really want to believe that is a galactic, like so far as there is a galactic federation that is like waiting for and helping humanity to ascend and is, responsible for the creation of life on Earth and all kinds of things that basically ends up placing this in almost as a god figure. And then the other side of this, you have skepticism coming in with people like Michael Shermer, who don't realize that they're not actually explaining away or debunking anything. To say, oh, well, we now know that the Roswell crash was, in fact, just Project Mogul. If you say that, then you would have also said before that, oh, we all know that the Roswell crash was a weather balloon. And then before that, though, you would have said, well, we all know that the Roswell crash was actually a crashed flying saucer that was recovered, because that was the official statement by the military. So basically, you're just taking this official statement and you're just parroting it. And this is not thinking, and it's not skepticism at all. In fact, it's the opposite of skepticism in what the conceptualization of what skepticism is. It's the acceptance of any narrative. And I'm not saying I know what crashed at Roswell. I think that there's a lot of, it seems to me like there's a lot going on there, things that are unconventional and things that are in alignment with the official narrative. But it could have been both, and I don't know. But the point is that you have to admit that you don't know. You can't try and just claim that the government has told us the truth because we know that they lie. And that doesn't mean you can't take them at their word when it supports the evidence, but sometimes it does not seem to support the evidence or the testimony of people, and we're going to discuss that today. So yeah, let's just get into it. There's so much to say about this, guys. I will say that we're going to get into the topic of why this is so difficult of a subject to even approach, and it is because no matter what the truth is, we have two groups of people, that one of them which they need to believe almost because it has become a source of idol worship, and then the other one side of this is they cannot believe because they either just don't realize that skepticism is not actually critical thinking, or if they are just, maybe there's an emotional opposition, who knows. But I try not to ascribe too much motive unless it's pretty overt, if I ever do make a statement about someone's motives in this, just know that that doesn't actually matter also to whether or not they're correct or not. So even if I say people are idol worshiping the existence of a galactic federation, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist either. It might. I don't think that it does, but it might. If just because people don't want to believe no matter what, because it smashes their worldview and it's too overwhelming, that doesn't mean that they're wrong either. It could be that this is all just human activity and not the result of any kind of unconventional technology. So we have to just keep that in mind. But regardless, it is absolutely true that there is a stigma attached to this that makes it difficult, and there is absolutely psyops on top of psyops on top of psyops in this subject, no matter what the truth is, coming from everywhere and everyone. People will say, oh, this is a psyop, this is a psyop, that's a psyop, on all sides of this topic. The reality is that this topic is psyops on top of psyops on top of psyops. And I think that there are specific ways of looking at that make more logical sense than others, but that is the truth. And that's very evident, is that there, and whatever that means. I don't really like the term anymore because people use it so much that now it just means I don't believe it. But I'm using it because it's being used in the current discussion. Just because there are psyops going on, though, does not mean that that other aspects of this topic don't have any degrees of truth to it. And also, saying that's a psyop, you should admit exactly more precisely what that means when you say that. Because it could be true and a psyop. It could be being used as a distraction from something else, which would be a terrible distraction because nobody seems to care about this other than a few niche people on the internet, which is very odd. But then there's... or it could be a psyop and it's fake. It's all fake, and this is working towards some other goal. And, that's why this word, it does not work. It's a terrible word to use almost any time unless you're going to attach a longer explanation to it. What do you mean by psyop? Okay, you think it's a psyop? Yeah, sure. What isn't a psyop from the government? That doesn't mean that everything that they tell us is false either, but it doesn't mean everything they tell us is true. So just keep that in mind with this stuff. And it's, like I said, it's one of the most difficult subjects to navigate out there. It probably is the most difficult subject to navigate. And I work on a fundamental theory of metaphysics, or theory of everything, if you want to call it. That's easier than this subject, being 100% honest. So this is... I thought this was interesting. So David Grusch was the Air Force Intelligence... worked for Air Force Intelligence, and I believe he worked with the Aero program, at least corresponded with them. I need to go into the details. I originally thought that he was working for the Aero program, but then there was a statement released by the head of it recently, a couple days ago, that basically implied that he wasn't. So I was a bit confused by that, and it's a bit confusing because everything is classified and also everything's a psyop and whatever, But here we go. First clip.
Of its kind, where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a SCIF prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grusch, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means, not just for our nation, but for humanity. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you very much.
So I thought that was interesting. That's Anna Paulina Luna, and she was one of the leaders of this this investigation. The fact that they were denied access to a SCIF, which is a secure, basically vault that is sealed so that you cannot spy on people's conversations while they're happening in there. You have to leave your phones outside. You are checked for electronics, and the whole thing is basically shielded against electronic listening devices and stuff like that. The fact that they were denied access to that to listen to David Grusch is very suspect. David Grusch is the first person to come forward other than Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar was not at the hearing, and I can understand why. I know a lot of people were disappointed. I think it would have been awesome for him to be there and hear from him. I do believe that he worked where he said he worked, it's interesting because he got his job at Area 51, or S4, which was south of Area 51, but you fly into Groom Lake, allegedly from a recommendation from Edward Teller. And I watched Oppenheimer this weekend. I saw Oppenheimer. good movie. It's interesting. Maybe we could talk about it on another stream, but I recommend watching it. It was good, but I have my criticisms of the film, but it was overall positive. And but you see Edward Teller in this film, and he's like trying to push for the hydrogen bomb the whole time, and I am looking at this, and I'm like, that's also the guy that guy allegedly, you would think, because of him getting Bob Lazar this job at Groom Lake, he knew about this phenomenon, and if Bob Lazar's telling the truth, it implies that Edward Teller was probably briefed on and maybe worked on some reverse engineering programs. And like I said, we're taking everybody at their word here. We can't... I'm not going to get on here and be like, I don't believe Bob Lazar and he's a liar, and I think that all these people are liars, and there is no, secret crash retrieval programs or anything like that. We're not going to do that because that doesn't make sense. That would take 2 seconds on a stream. I do believe Bob Lazar worked where he said he worked. That doesn't mean I believe everything the government told him, but I do believe that he worked where he said he worked. I believe that all these men saw what they said they saw, or heard what they said that they heard. So just that, again, disclaimer. But this really was a hearing like no other, because like I said, this was not a Project Blue Book type of situation. We had David Grusch coming in, who says that he'd spoken to witnesses and people on these programs who work on these programs now, and he claims to have the names of these programs, the locations of these programs, the names of the people working on these programs, and he supposedly has handed most of this off to people in Congress, which is amazing. That makes me think that this is going somewhere. It's not going to be a dead end. I don't know if this is actually a good thing, though. This, disclosure, honestly, if it is real, I used to think it was because I like I've said before, when I was in 7th grade, I wrote a paper about how the government should tell us about the existence of aliens if they knew, and I don't think these are aliens either. Just my own personal opinion. I don't think they're from somewhere else, but I do think that they're here, and that. But I just think that they're from here, whatever that means, and could be wrong, but But the fact remains that if they are here, and that we have recovered vehicles and bodies, as he has claimed, and he has given the information for all of these programs over to Congress, that is a turning point that is unlike anything else that we have ever had be part of this official discussion, because in the past it has been about things seen in the sky. Some of it was filmed, some of it was photographed. Sure, a lot of that was classified, apparently, and by military pilots and even commercial pilots. But none of that actually tells you anything about the phenomenon, other than maybe that it appears to exist. If we have recovered craft and bodies of a technological civilization or group that is not human as we know it, and they're in the possession of secret groups, quasi-governmental groups, and military contractors, and that information in locations and individuals has been handed off to Congress, it changes everything completely. And but like I said, if they are here, then they are trying to hide from us. And if they're trying to hide from us, there's a reason. And it means that they don't think that we will like what they are doing. That's what that means to me. It seems logical. I might be wrong. It might be Star Trek, and they're just waiting for us to invent, to come together and sing Kumbaya and invent warp transportation. And I say that, and it sounds like I'm saying it in a mocking way, and I am. But it might be true, but I don't think that it is. That's why I said it in a mocking way. But this subject, though, it might not go the way that we think when it comes to disclosure, and there's a factor and a force in this that nobody is talking about, and even with this happening, if these beings are trying to remain hidden, they are the top of the classification network. They're the ones who are in charge in some way, shape, or form. They are the top people at the head of the effort to keep this under wraps and to keep psyops coming out and confusing us, and like that is what we have to recognize as being probably true in this subject, and we don't. It's always the government covered it up, the Lockheed Martin's covering it up. Those things are true too, probably, but they're not the ones who are the most powerful beings involved when it comes to keeping humanity confused on this issue. And that's not something that anybody seems to speak about at all. It's always some other narrative than that one, which is interesting because that implies that this one could be accurate, is that everything else seems to come out. This subject is so frustrating, and I know I'm jumping around because there's so much to this, and I don't really know what's the best, like, I don't know, the chronological order for this to come out. But there's so much confusion to this subject and contradiction that, to me, it implies, and also coming at this from a physics narrative, that there is a force that is beyond human institutions that is responsible for confusing the world on this topic. When I was watching Oppenheimer last night, you have the United States builds the Manhattan Project to work on secret physics, and a secret physics program, basically, after everybody realizes that you can make a nuclear bomb probably in the world when physicists realize this, and the chain reaction is kind of implied, and they split the atom. Everybody's like, okay, we can make a bomb, and the U.S. sets up this very secret program, and it's very compartmentalized, or it's supposed to be. But what happens is you still have spies infiltrating it. You still have other countries aware enough of it to even try and get operatives into it. You have Russia or the Soviet Union creating a nuclear weapon shortly after us, and then everywhere else in the world did it. You have all these countries in Europe and I think India and Israel and France and Germany, and all these countries have nuclear weapons, and it was impossible to stop research on nuclear physics completely throughout the world. There was this point where the president, I think it was Truman in the movie, he looks at Oppenheimer after Oppenheimer goes to meet him, and they've dropped the bomb on Japan and bombs, and Oppenheimer says, we need to work with the Soviets to make sure that we don't escalate things too much and blow up the world, basically. And I think it was, like I said, Truman says to him, they're never going to get a bomb. They'll never invent it. And Oppenheimer's like, well, they got pretty good physicists over there. Like, they will. And he's like, no, they won't. And he just walks away. That if this is true, that there are craft that we have been working on reverse engineering, maybe successfully, maybe not. There's so much evidence, there's so many stories to support both of those, and they come from the same people in the same groups. They'll be like, don't you know that Bob Lazar, don't you believe Bob Lazar, where they made no progress studying UFOs at Area S4? And then the same people will be like, yeah, there was a secret air show in 1988, and there was reverse engineered, basically like craft that ran on the vacuum flying saucers that we made that, we used to go throughout the solar system. Like, this is very contradictory, and there's no other subject that I've ever seen that has so much internal decoherence. Every other subject that I've seen, even among topics that people go down roads that are total nonsense, they are internally often more consistent, where they build on false assumptions maybe that they have, but they don't have contradictory assumptions constantly, which is the truth of this subject. And that either implies there is so much going on to this and everything is true, or it implies that there is a very sophisticated and technologically capable, well beyond human institutions, effort to ensure that happens and keep our physics, suppressed. And it does appear to me that our physics has been suppressed. If you believe that we can advance, that there are advances in physics that could be made that are as profound as the quantum revolution, in the early last century, then it does look like our physics is artificially suppressed. Humans can't do that. That's my point about the Truman thing. When he said, "Oh, the Russians won't get the bomb," everybody got the bomb. But if we have TR-3Bs or whatever running around, these anti-gravity, black triangles that are alleged to come from these reverse engineering programs or to be associated with them, why is it that isn't popping up all around the world with all these different countries? It means that it's either not existent, and that these rumors are false, which is possible, or there is a much more powerful and sophisticated effort to disinform and suppress physics, and that is allowing it in certain institutions, or projects that are very quiet, for intentionally allowing it over here but not letting it go anywhere else. And that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think so. I'm waiting for that to become more part of this discussion, but it does get brought up, and we're going to look at it. So this is the next clip. I know I ranted a bit, but this subject drives me a bit.
Mr. Chairman, ranking member.
I don't want to say crazy, but it's frustrating.
Congressman, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grusch. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and many of my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP task force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, so he states here basically that he was a member of the Pentagon's program of investigating UAPs. But then you have this that just came out that was a statement by Sean Kirkpatrick, he's the director of Arrow. And he basically states that he says a bunch of, things about how this congressional hearing was insulting to him and all of his staff, which is just ridiculous. And if he thinks that, I don't know, that says some things about like whether or not this is actually a useful public program, I guess. And it's a public program, even if it's claims to, some people say it's not. But he says in this, it's implied that right here, to be clear, none of the whistleblowers from yesterday's hearing ever worked for Arrow or was ever a representative to Arrow, contrary to statements made and in the media, in testimony and in the media. So basically he's calling David Grusch a liar. All of this is, David Grusch's testimony is all under oath, so we have to take him at his word. But it is interesting to see this, and Eric Weinstein says this here. He says, as I've been saying, the U.S. government does not have a single position on UAP. We are watching warring factions. That's why everything looks so weird. The reports we have seen before are bizarre because they are akin to forcing rival street gangs to issue joint statements. Okay, this is actually probably accurate. It's not even probably accurate. It's almost definitely accurate, even if this stuff is all nonsense. But we're assuming that it's not in this discussion. But it's an inevitable truth that that's the case. The government is always warring factions. Look at every single discussion, almost always in politics, and it's usually the right versus the left, but or it's the establishment versus the newcomers, and then with this, there would be similar dynamics with probably established individuals on these programs who want things classified for whatever reasons they have. I'm not even going to say that it's wrong for them to do it actually anymore, because what if we found out that these beings were doing something terrible, not terrible, but things that we would really not want them to be doing, and there was nothing we could do about it, or trying to do something about it would make things worse. I don't know, but I don't think we should go hostile towards these things, and it's even if they are doing things that we don't like, it doesn't make sense. Given my just assumptions, obviously I don't know for sure what's going on, but I have theories that seem to be pretty consistent. And but this is not the tip of the iceberg, though, because like I said before, it is warring factions, but it's also something greater. There is a presence that does not want us to know what the heck is going on, and doesn't want their presence to be obvious. And in the cases where sorry, I have like a eyebrow out of place or something. But in the case where their presence is obvious, it seems that they would want their intentions to be very fuzzy and their origins to be unknown and their actions to be unknown and confusing. So this is not something that has been as much part of this discussion, but I do predict that it will go there. Though I will say this, it would go there. But here's the thing. If this is true, then what are they capable of to stop us from going there? It does seem like these beings are losing control of the narrative a little bit. I will say that. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of sway still and in their own ways, whatever they are. And this has so much implications on physics. It's funny because I keep thinking about my own work and Eric Weinstein's work and Chris Langan's work and Donald Hoffman's work and all these other people who have certain implications about physics and how the mind is fundamental essentially, and why they haven't gone anywhere. And like I said, it does appear like our physics has been artificially suppressed up until now, and why would that have stopped? It probably is still being artificially suppressed, and it's just they're losing control of their ability to do it effectively because of the internet. And you can't shut down the internet because then you alert everybody to your existence and your presence, and because everybody's going to be like, where did the internet go? You can't. So it's getting to the point, it seems, where if these beings are trying to keep us confused, it's getting harder and harder to stop us from talking. And that doesn't mean you can't confuse us more, but it is harder to stop us from speaking. And this is something that must be thought about when it comes to all of these efforts in physics and in declassifying this subject. What if geometric unity, as Eric Weinstein implies, it should be able to potentially allow for us to travel beyond the constraints of light speed, essentially. And we could jump, we could warp or something. I don't know if that's the way he would describe it, but he's been kind of vague in how to describe it. But if his theory allows for that, what if they don't want us to have it? Even if geometric unity is the direction that we should go, or in sentient singularity theory and conscious agent theory, whatever, all these theories that are out there, free energy principle, even if this is where we're supposed to go naturally because it is the truth, if there is a force that is trying to stop us, that doesn't mean they can stop us. You cannot stop the truth, but you can make the journey a very windy road. And this is something that I think needs to be thought about with all of these different, I guess, assumptions. Is it warring factions within the government? It doesn't matter if these beings are there and they don't want us to know. I mean, but it is obviously warring factions in the government and also in private contractors and in other, groups that we're not aware of probably. But beyond that, there's a greater power pulling strings. And that is heading the disinformation campaign, that would, and so this is same thing goes with physics. Like, if our physics has been artificially suppressed, it looks like physics is about to have a blooming. It does. It looks like we are having a renaissance right now, and we absolutely are, because of the internet. But I think that it should be thought about or considered that there might be forces at play that would artificially try and suppress the adoption of certain physics ideas that would level playing fields. And I don't know. I think that that's missing from this discussion all the time. It's always they're beings from another planet that are here to infiltrate the world and control the world. Why though? That's my question. If that's true, I'm not saying it's false, but I don't know. But if that's true, why? That's the question. And that doesn't seem to make sense to me at all. There's no reason that makes sense to me. And like I said, I don't know everything, so it could be that I just don't have enough information. But then the other side of this is just that they're benevolently waiting for us. And then you have people that are like, some of them are benevolent, some of them are not. And this is not the right way to look at it. This is even a problem in and of itself, as this is an infantile way of looking at things due to the media probably that we watch. It's either Independence Day or it's E.T. and Mac and Me. But like there isn't an in-between very often. And the reality is that is almost certainly the case, is that they're here using us or doing something that they don't want us to be aware of and that they think we would not approve of. But that doesn't mean that they are just malicious either. I spoke to somebody years ago, and I've mentioned this before, and he was very into this topic. And I asked him, do you think that they're malicious or do you think that they're like benevolent and good? And he was like, do you like cows? Or and I was like, yeah, I like cows, they're cute. And he was like, do you eat cheeseburgers? And I was like, okay, fair enough. Like we there are deer that are protected, and then there are deer that are hunted. And we need to just think about the subject very differently than we do. We do not think about it logically at all. It does not even make sense to think about it as some species are benevolent and some are allies, and they're just like Norwegian supermodels, Norwegian supermodels or whatever. Like, and I know I'm mocking that idea. I'm not saying that that's false. I don't know. I don't believe it. But there. And then there's also these grays that are just like terrible, and reptilians that are just terrible. No, there's some. If there is something here, then its interactions with us are not good or bad. They're a mixture of what we would think is good and bad. There's probably instances where they have saved people. There's probably instances where they have used people. And there's probably instances where they've killed people. And David Grusch has allegedly suggested. I don't really know if it's good to even be suggesting that in the public space, though, and on the news and stuff. I'm not saying that we should censor ourselves or anything like that, but it's we have to make sure that we like figure out what you're dealing with before you start just presenting a limited framework, or at least admit that it is a limited framework. That's what we should be doing, is admitting this is a very limited framework. And so, I don't know. It's just very frustrating. It's lots of warring factions in the government and private contractors, and it's probably also these beings that are trying to keep hidden, which means they're using us for something and they don't want us to know about it. And they're probably not benevolent or malicious. They're probably parasitic and, not that different from us in certain ways. Next clip. I thought this was a very interesting question right here that was asked.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Arrow, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Arrow in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Arrow.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another good point, is that when people are like, why would they let him speak? Because they, they don't know if he's saying anything true or not. It's just, is he revealing how to make stealth coatings for aircraft or not? That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for, is he making allegations that might or might not be true? Whoever's reading that stuff is not aware of these programs, almost guaranteed. But whoever's in charge of giving that approval, they have no idea about the existence of these programs, if they exist. But she asked a very interesting question, and it was that, are non-human intelligences in contact with foreign governments, and for any kind of cooperative means? And this was something that Bob Lazar had stated, was told to him when he was working at Area S4, and that basically that for a time the government and these beings were working together on whatever, they had a relationship of some type. That makes sense to me. If we have intact craft, how do you have intact craft? Did they leave the keys in the ignition at IHOP? I don't know how else you would get intact craft. Maybe they crashed, and sure, you might have recovered it mostly intact, but perfect condition, which is what Bob Lazar said was the sport model that he worked on, was in perfect condition. Where did that come from? That's a question. And it's not people are like, maybe an archaeological dig. Maybe it crashed, at Roswell or in Kingman, Arizona, or whatever. Maybe all these things have happened. They've recovered craft in those instances. But perfect condition, working, and you can figure out how to turn it on, even? How did you get that? It implies at some point it was given to you, to me at least. That seems to be the most likely answer to that. And also, here's another consideration that I never hear anybody bring up. Why are we allowed to have this stuff that we recover? If these things are so advanced that they can literally turn on and off our nukes at whim and jam our planes completely, our most advanced fighter jets, the most advanced sensors on fighter jets, they're not the most advanced fighter jets that they were using, but still, the sensors were very advanced. And if they can jam all that, why can't they take back any craft that for some reason we recovered if they don't want us to know, to have it? It implies that there is some type of relationship, and he has asked this question again, right here. By another member of Congress about the United States government, and his
questions for you too, sir.
His answer was different.
What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government, of the 5% that are reported?
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I can triage. So.
Do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
And was this documentary evidence, video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you.
See, this is why this is just so unpredictable, where this goes from here. Because, for one, these beings do not want to be known. Like, they don't want us, the world, to know at large that they're here and definitely here and doing things that we're not aware of, and that's just self-evident. I mean, otherwise, start streaming on YouTube. Like, why wouldn't they do that? And or something, on that was much more obvious. And they seem to understand what is a area of national significance and military importance if they can go to our nuclear sites, but then they'll go to the aerial school in Zimbabwe, land outside, and tell a bunch of 10-year-olds and kindergartners that we need to save the planet. Like, I believe that story, by the way, but that implies that they're trying to confuse us. They're not stupid. Why would they go to kindergartners to tell them to save the planet? Like, that's not a sensible thing to do. It's a thing that you do to confuse people. Or if you're just I don't know, bored, in which case the result is the same. It's not a if it's a planned action, it's for disinformation or confusion and and psyop essentially. And if it's not, then they're just bored, and that could be the case. That totally could be the case. We do weird things, but that's not a disclosure event. It's not, and it doesn't signal that they want us to know that they're here at large, at all. They're talking to kindergartners. It's just interesting because he says he can provide the names of these programs, the people involved, the locations, and apparently has provided them. And he's implying in this, it seems, that the American government has been in contact with these beings at some point, which is, been rumored and seems to be suggested by other stories involving us having intact craft and being allowed to keep it and test it. Why wouldn't they just take it back? Why would we even be allowed to have it intact in the first place? It just makes no sense whatsoever unless this is an agreement of some type. And that's fascinating. And to see that pop up in this setting it is monumental. But the thing is that if those beings don't want us to know about any of this, we also can't necessarily expect that this goes the way that you would naturally, logically expect it to go, because it's not just a matter of them showing up to places now with warrants and raiding the flying saucers. Like, there's a force at play and pulling strings that is beyond human, it seems. So that doesn't want this to be disclosed, but yet it seems like they are losing that battle. And I mean, it would make sense. You do get to the truth always. You cannot hide lies forever. And maybe for little things do end up never being told to the public by the government. Of course that happens, but big things like this, where people are actively searching for the truth, that's when you can't hide it. If people are not searching, then they're not going to find it. But if they're searching for the truth, they're going to find it eventually. And then you combine that with the rise of the internet, and as capable as they are, these beings, they cannot control the entire internet. I do not think that they have that ability. That seems to be beyond the ability of any individual being that isn't the network itself, sentient network, Skynet type of situation, which we don't have yet. But outside that, it doesn't seem possible to control the internet. I don't even know if you could shut it down. But if they did shut it down, then that's not okay either, because then we all know that they're here. So it does seem like it's logically implied that they are just, losing control a bit, but of this narrative. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to fight back as far as, trying to keep us in the dark. I don't mean physically. I think they need us. I don't think they're going to wipe us out. They're not here trying to plan how to wipe out humanity. That doesn't make any sense, and they would have already done it. And it wouldn't even make sense for them to do it. We're not a warring civilization with them or anything like that. And so it just doesn't make any sense. There's, like I said, this is not are they malicious or are they benevolent? That's not a good question. The good question is, what would they be doing here that they would want us to not be aware of? And why would they need to be here? Which they appear to need to be here. I don't know. Why do they have agreements with our governments? Apparently. Not with even the government, with, I don't even want to call it the deep state. You could call it the super deep state. Whatever that is, this quasi-governmental / military industrial complex entity group that's probably very small, that is allowed to operate certain types of craft that they won't even allow other countries to figure out how to do. And they'll throw off the physics progress of the world in order to stop it. That's partially what I think has happened to physics. Now, granted, physics is also suffering from the same exact problems as every other field, in that we have lost everything. Everything has become thrown off by placing people in charge of the institutions who have only had experience with the subjects that they're in charge of secondhand, and our education system has basically screwed up everybody's ability to decipher who is competent and how to think and all kinds of things. That has infected every single field, and that is partially responsible for the lack of physics progress that we've had. But what's odd is that it doesn't take much instances for physics progress to be made that would then be able to be shown to be useful, and then from there moved into some program or something like that. But it does seem like even if we have these types of tech in these classified programs, like TR3B type of technology, anti-gravity technology, then we seem to be the only ones with it. It doesn't seem to be like something Russia also has hidden away. And that implies that this is not just human groups keeping it secret. So I don't know where we go from this. It's just fascinating. It seems they want to be seen dangerous and scary to some degree as well. I'm all about the power of our minds, telepathy, and teleportation. It's like I said in Serenity, you can't stop the signal. What if the Earth is a soul recycling plant and they are the ones who run it? Maybe. I don't know exactly what you mean, but it seems like an interesting question. Interstellar Norwegians by Balenciaga. Yes, that's very funny. It's very apparent that this subject is idol worshipped for some people. And it's super obvious because they'll say things like, isn't it obvious? They'll say the gods of the past in scriptures are actually these beings, and they'll say that. Now, I'm not saying that there is no reference to these beings in scripture. I don't know. It does seem like there's some parallels between some beings and some and these things, and some things that are said about these things, but that's not it's not God. God is the sentient existence itself, the initial singular sentience that created all other sentient beings. But I remember once I had said to somebody, I was like, who we got along very well, and we were talking about mathematics, and they were into a lot of just looking at a lot of patterns in mathematics, and they had a real knack for it. And I had started talking to them about some of what they were working on for a while, and then they posted something about how the aliens are probably the gods of the past, what we called gods, or what religion calls God is actually aliens. And I said to him that it's possible that there's other technological beings around us that we would call alien, but that's not the God. That's not the definition of God. And they like blocked me and everything. And that it was so weird, because it was like a throwaway statement by me, but to them it was like earth shattering. And it's because this subject is, it's like idol worship at that point. They're not gods, whatever they are. I don't think they're angels or demons either, but who knows? They might be. Trojan horse. What the fuck does a holographic principle have to do with interdimensions? I don't think anybody knows what that what any of this stuff means anymore when it comes to talking about like the holographic principle and things like that. I can't blame David Grusch when he was asked. He was asked, where is it? Right here. He was asked, can you explain them coming from other dimensions and potentially, and he said, well, for instance, the holographic principle, and he like said something about it, and I saw some physicists on Twitter were like, oh, this should discredit this guy completely. He doesn't know what he's talking about with the holographic principle. Guys, most professional physicists don't know what the heck they're talking about with any of this stuff either. At all. At all. They'll tell you don't know what you're talking about with this stuff, and then they don't know. I'm not saying David Grusch knows what he's talking about. I don't think he knows. But it's not his job to know. And, when we say things like, oh, they could be interdimensional, we don't know what that means at all. And I can't explain it to you. I'm not going to try. They could be from the future, and that would be some type of dimensional travel. But dimensions just are there are degrees of freedom or constraints in some navigatable space. That is it. So it's not or structure. It's we in the media and movies and stuff, we'll say different dimension to mean like another universe, and but then we'll say it to mean from heaven and all kinds of stuff. And it's just such a non-specific statement that you can't really expect some type of specific answer to come from it. He just gave an example that basically showed that it seemed like his attempt was to show we don't know the totality of physics, and there are theories to imply that that there's more to the physical universe than we currently have a solid understanding of, and that's obvious. And so, I don't know how much that has to do with this, to be quite honest, other than how they travel, but it might have something to do with it. Like I said, I don't know where these things are from. I am assuming they exist, and after seeing the craft that I saw, which was a craft of some type, there's certainly some beings operating technology that is way beyond anything conventional. And I know every single declassified aircraft that the United States has ever made. Not the classified ones, but obviously I don't work for defense contractors, but I do know about every single one that has been declassified or is not classified. And this was nothing like any of that at all. So here, hairless monkeys have this shiny toy. Well, the funny thing is that you say that, and we're talking about like, oh, are they? Do they have an agreement where they're providing technology to us? They're just a more hairless monkey if they exist. It's like people say things that are just about them that are like, oh, they would be so unconcerned with us, it would be like we'd be like ants to them. No, not at all. Especially not if we've started, messing with nuclear physics. No, that's not true at all. We were probably within 50 years of being able to operate anti-gravity craft on our own if we hadn't been thrown off probably by them. And that, like, tech grows exponentially, and physics advances exponentially as well. And you can go into some type of dark ages, and we have, but the question is why? And there's multiple reasons for it. One of them is obvious, which is how education system has impacted our ability to examine competency and of ourselves and of others. But the other thing that could be the case, and I think should be assumed to be the case, and if we're assuming the existence of them in the first place, is that there's beings that are not human as we know it, who are messing with our tech to suppress it and only allowing it in certain groups, as a to keep them satisfied or something. I don't know, but they are just more hairless monkeys. They're not. How are they different from us in that respect? They're not. They're just allegedly more hairless. So that's, maybe they do give you a shiny toy, but it's not this dynamic of us to ants at all. It's not even close. It's not even us to chimps. It's closer, but it's not. We don't try and artificially suppress chimpanzee technology. But imagine if we had discovered that there was a group of chimps that had already discovered farming and all this, and we had let them do it, and to some degree there's some evidence to suggest that there's primitive understanding of that in certain species. But ants farm. They farm fungus and all kinds of stuff that's not really like that crazy. But what if we had figured out that there was a group of gorillas or chimps in the mountains of Africa that had just discovered dynamite? What are we gonna do now? Like, that's different. That's closer to this dynamic. They just discovered dynamite, but with us it was nukes probably. If you discover dynamite, you're like a couple hundred years away from where we are now. Not a couple hundred, but like not that far. And maybe when was dynamite? Nobel discovered dynamite. When? Just to show how quick this happens. Nobel's second important invention was that of dynamite in 1867. So yeah, I mean, I was thinking about gunpowder, but that's a little older than dynamite. But dynamite is 1867, guys. It's 150 years ago, something like that. That's not far away. Like, you go from nukes to anti-gravity quicker than you go from dynamite to nukes. Guaranteed. Almost guaranteed. And so something's going on. But would we stop the chimps from developing further if we realized that they had developed dynamite? Probably we'd try and start being like, no, it's time to step in and like manipulate them a bit instead of just letting them advance. So it's not the same as us to ants. That's just false. That's based on so many additional assumptions regarding, how people say they're billions of years ahead of us. Doesn't matter. They could be, if they were 200 years ahead of us, they'd have the same tech probably as they would have if they were 10,000 years ahead of us, because you're going to reach a cap at a certain point, and it's not far. So it doesn't matter. People say, well, what if they're 1,000 years ahead of us? What if they're 10,000 years ahead of us? What if they're 1,000,000 years ahead of us? There's no difference between those numbers, I would bet, in technological ability. None. Like, zero. There's nothing that technologically that would be revolutionary, that we would invent beyond 1,000 years from now. We will invent every technological revolutionary invention from between now and 1,000 years from now easily, like probably less, that could be invented. That doesn't mean little things can't be made and optimized and make new, cool things and toys and tools or whatever, but that's different than physics revolutions that cause fundamental new technologies to be developed, like nuclear fission or nuclear fusion or gasoline and oil, fossil fuel technology, or solar. I mean, not even solar. Solar is not even one of those, but like fossil fuels or nuclear technology. Like there will be. We will discover everything within the next 1,000 years if we're not artificially suppressed to the point of stopping. Here. Next clip.
And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
I'll get to answer your first question, and here's the fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we can probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge. Plus, the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am waiting of. So,
okay, so there's a few things here. When he's talking about the holographic principle, like I said, he's just stating, it seems like, oh well, there's a lot of theories that imply that we don't know there's a lot more going on with the physical universe than we are aware of. And sure, that's fine. But the other thing that he's talking about here is something that's brought up all the time, which is, people say if they could get here over, millions of light years, then why would they just crash? Like, that makes no sense. And it doesn't make any sense. They're right. That makes no sense. But that means that the framework that you've put forward makes no sense. It doesn't imply that what people are saying about crashes are not true. It means the framework that you are putting forward makes no sense, or the crashes are not true. And it's one or the other. But I would say this: it's more likely that the framework is not true, because if you can get here from millions of light years away, then how you got here was not by using typical navigation procedures. You're not just flying through space. You are jumping through subspace or something like that. I don't know how to say it because we have no words for it, and we don't know exactly how it happens, or I don't at least. And but I have ideas. But you're jumping through a structure through the dimensions of a structure in a way that allows you to transcend and skip all that. And that's not the same as flying around. That's different. And also, people will say things like this. They'll say, well, look at the crash rate of commercial jets. And these things are way more advanced than us. And commercial jets almost never go down. But these things are going down way more than commercial jets, it seems. The thing is first of all, it doesn't seem like these things are going down all the time. If they're flying around every day and there's a supposed crash retrieval, I don't know, every decade or a few years maximum, but decade, from the ones that I've heard about that seemed to be more of a bigger story, that's still a very low rate, but you're not comparing apples to apples here, because whatever's being brought down seems to be one of two things, if you believe these stories. Again, one is an uncrewed drone of some type. The other one is a crewed craft with beings in it that is it has a small number of beings, like I don't know, 2 to 20 or something like that. Like, it's not a commercial airliner. It's very different. It's much closer to a personal plane or a car, even a car. Like, these things are probably their cars. And so we crash cars all the time, way more than they crash their things. So it changes the perspective a bit. There's also all kinds of ideas that have been rumors that have been put forth about, Stephen Greer talks about it a lot, is that we shoot them down. We are not with missiles, but with other types of classified technology, and that we're bringing them down. This, to me, might be true, because I will admit, Stephen Greer, he is right about a lot of things, and he knows a lot of things, a lot more about this subject than almost anyone else, probably, from what I can tell. But I also just believe, from my own logical, examination, I don't know if this is true, it might be that I'm wrong and he's right, but I would assume that he also has a lot more disinformation than anyone else that's being fed to him, and that he wouldn't be able to always decipher what is what, especially if these beings are responsible for sending him the disinformation. Maybe not personally, like directly, but they are somehow directing it so that it gets to him. You would want that, because he's such a big voice that then you're the number one subject of disinformation. It's probably Stephen Greer. He's the biggest voice on this. So disinformation from private military industrial complex contractors, government agencies, hidden programs in the Pentagon, and also beings that don't want to be, known in a normal way, I guess. And I think that you can imply that that's the case, but also it's very odd to me, because if you think about it like this, and I don't know what I hope is true, actually. Like, none of this sounds good, but his narrative does not sound good to me. Neither does what I think, and it's just like both of them are just two not so pleasant scenarios, and but we won't shoot down a Russian drone just, whenever we want, just because we want to see it. We don't shoot down their planes ever, because that would start a war. And like, why would we shoot down an alien, a flying saucer? And I don't think they're aliens, like I said, but even if they are, it doesn't matter. Why would we shoot down a technologically advanced craft and risk pissing them off like that? That makes no sense to me. Now, there might be reasons why they don't retaliate. He says that it's because they're so just enlightened, basically, that they don't retaliate. But it might also be because they need us in some way, and retaliating reveals them, and they can't afford to do that. That might be true, that for some reason these programs started doing this, and before they were really thinking about the repercussions too much, and then and they just continued doing it because there were never any consequences. But if there's no consequences, that does imply that, it could imply many things that we don't have the full picture, but it does seem to be consistent with the idea that they can't reveal themselves because they're using us for something. And they if that's the case, I don't think they're from another planet. It doesn't make sense that you would need to come here and use us. You would need us to the point where you're like, we're shooting you down and you don't even retaliate. To if you need, like, why do you need us now? Why didn't you need us at another planet? Like, it doesn't make, a lot of this just doesn't make sense if it's from another planet. Like I said, I could be wrong, but and people will say things like there's all these different races and there's 67 different kinds of beings, and guys, all this sounds to me like exactly what some race would promote as disinformation if they were here and they were from here and they didn't want us to know what they were doing and they needed us. And you were like some parasitic proto-human or something like that. I don't know, from a preceding civilization or who knows. But it's not consistent. The idea that there's like some huge galactic federation and that there's some races that are malicious and some that are not, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense that they would need us if they're from another place. It doesn't make sense that they would need to come here if they could be from another place and mess with our nukes and stuff like that. Like, don't you have your own planet? If that's the case, it just makes no sense. The whole they're from another planet idea is probably a psyop. And like, I might not be, I don't know, but I'm just saying it's like the perfect psyop. If you were, these things seem to be going in and out from under the water. That means they're like below us. And it's funny. There's like rumors that they're underground, and I used to laugh at that. And I remember somebody told me that years ago, and I was like, dude, I thought the guy was crazy. And I still don't believe everything that he was saying, but the rumors don't come from nowhere. Okay, they don't. That's not how information works, and that doesn't mean they're true. It just means they don't come from nowhere. There is an origin to a rumor, even if it's totally false and it's started intentionally by someone for ulterior motives. It still comes from somewhere. And you got to think about, like, what would be the motives of some of this, like some of these rumors. But if you were a super intelligent or more advanced species or race of technologically capable beings, and you needed humanity to be oblivious to your activities and your presence, or confused to your activities and presence, and you lived underground, where would you want them looking for you? Outer space, maybe? Maybe you'd want them to look to other planets and make Kepler telescopes and all kinds of things like that. It seems so artificial and I used to not think any of this. I thought there's no way we're the only ones. There's only life on Earth. That makes no sense. There's no way. But why does it appear like life only evolved once on Earth? Like, or not evolve, like, why did cellular life only manifest once on Earth? It seems like we're all related. Like, there was one point where cell was created, and then there was a point where multicellular life was created, and that this is a tree that goes like this. It's not two trees. Why are there not multiple trees of cellular life if it's just a matter of conditions and time? And Earth is apparently, habitable for cellular life, obviously. So why isn't there multiple genesises of it? It just shows we don't understand what's going on. Even Sarah Walker, who's a molecular biologist, I guess you could call her, very brilliant on this types of subject, and she said once on, I think, Lex Fridman's show that what if the idea that life just happens when the conditions are correct, and they're using life to mean cellular life, is not the way that it works, and it's actually a collective process of the universe itself, and so therefore would only manifest in one location, because each of these levels is stacked on top of the previous, and each level can only happen once in a system. That makes more sense with my work, and it also seems consistent with what we see on Earth, and it also seems consistent with the lack of what we see outside of Earth. And granted, I understand it might be difficult to see any kind of biological life that would be beyond Earth right now, because we're not going to many other celestial bodies, at least in an unclassified way, and looking. But the point is that even if you look at Earth, which has perfect conditions, why doesn't it just manifest in every other puddle that it sits for long enough? Like, it doesn't make sense, and that it would only have generated once. And but if you do imply, if you reinforce or even start the rumor that, like, there's a bunch of races of aliens out there, it seems to be very useful to keeping people confused and looking literally in the wrong spot for you, and thinking about what it completely throws you off where, like, what logically couldn't be implied by your presence, and your clandestine presence, continued clandestine presence in our environment. Like, if you're just studying animals and you're just, like, looking at life on another planet the same way that we look at I don't know, like fish or something, and you see that they're making nukes and stuff like that, I just don't understand why you even intervene. And it seems like they do, and if they intervene with that, then why wouldn't they intervene with other technological and physics processes? But it's not, none of this seems to make any sense if they're from outer space to me. I might be wrong. I want to just admit that, like, fully on this. There's so much certainty that is said in this subject, and it is, I will admit, it's, like, very frustrating, because you'll get online and you've got people saying things that, from Stephen Greer saying things with such certainty, and I think that a lot of the things he does actually know, but that doesn't mean that everything that he says is so certain. He would be logically the number one target for disinformation by everyone. And then you also have people who, for some reason or another, and maybe they do know, maybe they know and I don't, but they talk about every race of beings that could exist, and it's just this never-ending story of chaos. and I just doesn't. It seems to be much more. The only way it makes sense with the information, without access to information that I can't even imagine because I don't know it, that I would be missing if this is true, then the only way that any of this subject makes sense is that there is an active effort to keep us confused that is coming also from the beings that are trying to remain hidden. And which they are, if you assume they're here. They are trying to remain hidden. That doesn't mean they're always going to be hidden. It just means they're not going to reveal themselves as a whole. They might be, go to that school and tell kids to take care of the environment. Maybe go to a CE5 event and show up and show everybody how peaceful I am. Like maybe go turn off a nuke over there and turn it back on, just as I don't know, to test something. Who knows? But it's like that's not the same as revealing yourself, where all of a sudden we're meeting at the farmer's market together. That's not happening, and there's a reason for that. I'm not saying I know what the reason is, but it does seem to imply they need us for something, and I don't know if it's so good for us to find out what that is. I will say that's almost like a fear response from me, though, and so that's maybe not a good thing because, but it's not even I don't even know if it's a fear response because I just think that maybe it's best if this doesn't go so chaotic and it just ends up, that people don't find out whatever it is that they're doing, that if it's unpleasant. But I don't know. Maybe it's good for us to find out. Who knows? God's will be done. At the end of the day, like He will deal with the non-human intelligence. He will deal with us, and everything will be put exactly the way that it's supposed to. So there's, it shouldn't really matter that much, like what direction this goes down, but it is interesting to me, and I will admit that I just am personally fascinated by the subject because there's so many aspects of it that are just unlike anything else. Studying it is unlike anything else. If it's true that we have recovered craft, that's fascinating, and bodies, and if it's true that we have reverse engineered or even built on our own, like anti-gravity craft and things like that, that's almost more interesting to me than even other beings. Then that's just it's just a huge fascinating subject, but it's also very frustrating. And I realize I talked probably way more than we showed clips of the hearing, but we'll show a couple more, but there were statements made in this that are unlike any statements that have ever been made. They weren't, do UFOs exist? What does that even mean? It was statements like, does the government have recovered non-human bodies in its possession? Do military contractors have recovered non-human technology in their possession? That was the assertion. And it was taken seriously enough to warrant a hearing. That is unique. That is a turning point. I remember years ago when I had first started listening to, they published this like article in the New York Times and everything like that, and I first started listening to Richard Dolan, who's got a great channel. I highly recommend subscribing to it. And he approaches the subject with a lot of humility that I was not seeing really anywhere else. That was like very, very, very refreshing. It was in fact to this day he is the most humble person in this discussion that I have seen in just how he speaks about this. And he admits that he has his ideas, but he also admits that he doesn't know, and there are a lot of people that do claim to know things on every other side of this discussion. They know it. They don't, and maybe they do. I know there are craft that are unconventional around us. I don't know. I'm not saying I know where it came from or anything like that. Some people will say the Tic Tac was Lockheed Martin that was spotted off the Nimitz, and we'll look at that in a minute. And then some people will say that it was, extraterrestrial, and some people think it's Atlanteans or something, and like it doesn't matter though to whether the question should first be was it actually something that was unconventional, and it appears to be, and I have seen something that was absolutely unconventional, so I will state firsthand information. I see that there are things that are unconventional, and it wasn't briefly. It was, I don't know how long the video is that's on my YouTube channel, but you can watch it. It's multiple minutes long. And being in person was more obvious even. But that, I don't know where it's from, and I'm not going to make an assertion to know where it's from. But I will share that I have thoughts. I have invested enough energy in this subject to have ideas about it, but it also don't really it doesn't. If I'm wrong, I want to know. But I also don't think that this subject is also very interesting because there's just so much to say about it. Then it's not very useful to know. I don't think. People say things like, "Oh, well, we could get rid of fossil fuels completely, and we could have free energy," and maybe that's true. And if that's the case, then that sounds useful, obviously. But there, you have to factor that into the whole entire environment that we might be in, which is that there's also these beings around that do have that, and they don't want us to have it. And so, is it practical for us to have it if they don't want us to have it? It doesn't, like I said, I'm for the truth, but it is just, it's more confusing whether, it's not so clear, I will say, whether or not disclosure is a useful thing to humans. I'm not saying it isn't, that we should keep it a secret. I don't know. But I'm just saying, even if it's disclosed that these things exist, it might not be useful. It might be more harmful, actually, than useful. But it certainly isn't. I do not think that it is a good thing that this stuff is a secret or anything like that. But I'm just saying that if you're thinking about the entire ecosystem and all the causes and effects and motives at play by different parties that would be involved in this cover-up situation and coexisting situation that we're appear to be in, it doesn't seem useful that we would find out that these things are definitely there. And, it's funny, though, I think that I was talking to somebody and they were like, it's amazing to me that more people aren't interested in this. And I said the same thing, but I also think that you wouldn't want them to be, because there's not enough being presented to them for them to take it seriously anyways, because it's all secondhand information, and it's mostly rumors, to be quite honest, for most people. Until you've seen something in person, it's mostly rumors. And that doesn't mean there's no coherence to those rumors, but it just means it's mostly rumors. And it doesn't make sense for them to put their energy into it. If they released pictures of flying saucers that they had in Lockheed Martin hangars tomorrow, I think that it would be the biggest news story in the world for a week. And then I think that we would get back to talking about Barbie. And I did think about it. And I was like, what would though change? What really would change things and get people to really pay attention? And I think that if they ever showed the bodies that they have, I think that we would treat this subject very differently. I think that would be the closest that you get to disclosure. What is disclosure? If they know why they're here and what they're doing, and they don't tell us, but they tell us that they're here and here's the bodies, is that disclosure? I don't know. But it's it's probably would be the most ontologically shocking thing to the world. Not that, and that doesn't mean it would be like destroying of people's minds. It just means it would be like profound. But most people believe that, these beings exist wherever they're from. I would think, or at least they believe that they would exist. A lot of people think there would be life on other planets, even if it's not here, and that we will discover it one day. And then you have other people that think that there's ancient civilization still around, and but that's a smaller group. But it's still like you combine those two, and like to see this wouldn't be changing of our worldview. It would just be profound. It would be really, really profound. But I saw that I think there was some quick quote that was attributed to Tom DeLonge, who started To the Stars Academy and was like had the goal of starting this disclosure. It seemed, that was its stated goal. And he said something though that I really did like, and he said, at the end of the day, it's just nature. And I really liked that, because I think that, even if the truth is unpleasant about it and stuff like that, it's like, I've stated on here, I think they're parasitic on humanity. I think that they have trouble surviving on their own and reproducing on their own. They're using us for it somehow. And because I think that you screw up your genes when you invent the, gene editing, and I would imagine that they've gotten there. And you screw them up before you figure out that you screwed it up, and you can't fix it. That's what is implied by my work. We can't fix it. God can fix it, in Messianic era, but not here. You can't fix if you screw your gene up by changing a gene and it causes cascading decoherence, and then you go back and you're like, actually we switched that gene and it's caused problems, let's switch it back. You already caused the cascading decoherence. Like it does, you can't fix it. So and that just compounds and compounds and compounds, it seems like, over time. Maybe it's actually resolved over generations, I don't know, but maybe not. And if that's the case, it's like we have parasites, that we live with. They talk about eradicating mosquitoes, and a lot of times there's like two things in the world that I'd be like, okay, I love animals, but mosquitoes and ticks, like, we could get rid of them and I wouldn't shed a tear. They are, two parasites. But the thing is like, God also put them here. So, I might not like them, but they seem to have some purpose, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So it's there's a lot of deep thoughts that come from this subject if you really think about it a lot, instead of just adopting a narrative. And you do have to, in order to have to engage with this subject, you do have to assume some things are true that are rumors, unless you have seen something personally, and that's fine. We should take most people at their word, until they prove to you that they're lying. People say things like, that you should assume everybody's lying until they've proven themselves and stuff. And it's like, in certain situations that is true, but it's specific. Normally, you should take people at their word, in generalities. But you only should not take people at their word if they have a history of lying and it, or if really maybe what they're saying is incongruent with what some other firsthand experience that you have, or if you need to know that they are telling the truth and you need them to prove it first because of the magnitude of the consequences of trusting them, like marriage. Like, you need to prove yourself to in some degree, or in certain high stakes relationships and things like that. So, but that's it. If you're just talking to somebody and they tell you something, If you assume everybody's lying, that's called skepticism, and you cannot actually operate in the world like that. You can't. If you operate in the world with believing that most people's statements are true to their understanding of it, you can operate in the world, and occasionally you will get burned. That is just a fact. But you also can operate in the world. If you assume everyone is lying all the time, you literally could not navigate a social environment at all. You would fall apart. That's literally what skepticism is. I wish that Michael Shermer realized that, but it says like you fall apart to the point because you can't actually be skeptical. That's why he'll say, "I'm a skeptic. I don't believe that this is UFOs." Oh, but just we know what Roswell was. It's like you're not being very skeptical of the government for somebody who's a skeptic. You're really trusting the military, and that is because you can't not trust. You have to trust something. It's just like you got to contextualize it. Okay, let's get to the chat. What if it's just the Nazis? People say that. They say Roswell was a Nazi craft that was filled with like malnourished like slave workers and was just... I just think that's just nonsense. That sounds crazy to me. But all of this sounds crazy. I'm not saying it's false, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it's Nazis. Not that it's impossible, of course, but it is quite fantastical seeming, especially when, according to his films, he regularly makes contact with them or at least summons them overhead. He does say he communicates them directly and has most of his life around. His CE5 protocol is based on the idea that you channel them if your intent is aligned, right? Among the supposed dozens of confirmed species, you can't forget about the Lyrians. Just your classic anthropomorphic lion. That's funny. That's hilarious. Lion people sounds scary. Yeah, it does. But yeah, I don't want I don't mean to mock things like too heavily, but I just know for the record, I do fully admit that even the things that I mock because I think they're wrong and totally logically inconsistent doesn't mean that I'm right and they're not correct. They could be right and I'm wrong, and then I'll take it back. But until then, I will just state that some of these things sound, I don't know, just not consistent. They sound like a psyop, and they are. It's just a matter of which parts of it are disinformation, and who's that disinformation coming from and why. This is my friend posted and said to me in a private conversation as well, aliens are a psyop. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, should I even respond to this? Because I do think that, personally, I don't think that they're beings from other planets. So I can't say I'm in disagreement, but I also know that what he means is he thinks that the government's just lying about all of this. And I don't really think that that's the case either. And so I just left. It didn't answer. But... and then eventually I was just like, of course it's a psyop. This whole subject is psyops on top of psyops on top of psyops. And that doesn't mean that there isn't something profound going on, and that's it. Like we have to operate with that mentality. We can't, to be picking teams in this, I think is wrong. I think that we should assume that every single team on this subject is compromised. They all stem from some truth, and they all are also compromised. It's not just warring factions between two groups, disclosure and non-disclosure, even though that is part of it. It's also more than that. And if it's true that there's something to be disclosed, then there's beings that want this hidden. They don't want it public. It doesn't matter if they go and show up to CE5 events. They don't want to be revealed at large to humanity. they do know that, like, you know, showing up and speaking to one person who's meditated, you know, properly is not, and I'm not saying that as a mocking. I actually think that it makes perfect sense that that our minds can connect like that. I believe it makes perfect sense with the type of tech that they would be using to do all the things that they do, because that is what the next stage in physics is. It's the recognition that we're inside a mind, and that we and it's about, you know, building on that idea and navigating it. So of course that makes some sense. I'm not saying that that's not a mocking statement, but I'm just saying you're not showing up and going on the news, you know, showing your face, standing at a podium next to Biden. Like, it's just a different, you're still remaining classified, I guess. You know, you're remaining, the existence of your civilization really is, and your intentions and your history and everything is all still being hidden. You're not introducing yourself. It's just different. So I'm not saying that there aren't instances that people have had where they have been approached by these things and they've been told the truth about everything, and then they tell us, and then we all think that they're crazy. Could be. But actually, it would be, if that happened, it would be the case that we would think that. But I think that also the fact that there isn't a more widespread interaction, open interaction between them and us, is indicative of what is relevant to this. And you know, so people are like waiting for disclosure. This is kind of one of my main points that we can start to close out on, and is that if the government told you everything that it knew, and Lockheed Martin revealed everything that it had, and these things did not start openly interacting with us in a completely open way, and then you can't really think that you got disclosure. Like, not really. It's not about disclosure. It's about, I don't know what the word for it would be, but it's like, I don't want to say revelation because that sounds like not something else that I'm not trying to say, but revealing yourselves to a civilization, like, and starting a relationship. People will say things like, why don't we try diplomacy with them? Or, you know, I saw somebody say that. It sounds like we have had, you know, all kinds of agreements and stuff based on rumors and that are within the military-industrial complex. And then you also have people going to CE5 events and having their own individual experiences, maybe not at CE5 events, where they are interacting and communicating in some way with some of these beings. But that, again, though, that in and of itself, it's that's not what people meant when they say diplomacy, because diplomacy, what they're talking about is like, why don't we try to approach them and be like, hey, you know, we want to introduce ourselves. It's like, it's not for us to do, it's for them. Like, it seems like it. So if they don't want that, then, which they don't, I don't think, otherwise they would have done it. That just throws a wrench into the entire subject. It just does. There's no way that it doesn't. It makes it way more unpredictable about where this goes, and regardless of what happens, it's a fascinating thing to watch. That's all I will say. It's very entertaining, and I'm much more interested in did we crack anti-gravity in the 50s? Like, that's what I want to know, that way more than I want to, like, know where the NHIs are from. Like, I care, but I don't really care that much. I'd much more be interested in any kind of human-made tech that we have, and just how, and that whole story, and how is that being suppressed so much. And like I said before, I don't think that even that makes sense without some type of agreement between us and beings that wouldn't want the world to have that tech. I don't know. Could be wrong about everything I just said, guys. Everybody in this panel, in this hearing, could be wrong, but they could all be right. And, everything they saw was unconventional technology. David Grusch could be right about and all the details that he's provided about these projects, supposedly to Congress. And I do believe him, though. That's the thing, is I don't think that it would be, if you're going to assume that these people are all mistaken, just don't engage with the subject. Don't be Mick West. I'm not saying that there's no use to some of the things that he's done, and same thing with Michael Shermer, but we should try and explain something that we see that's confusing always, but that doesn't discount. You could explain away every single unidentified phenomenon that somebody brings you and still have technological beings around that you're just not aware of. So it's not part of this discussion in the same way. And I think that just recognize that if you think that this is all nonsense, then don't focus on it. That doesn't mean you have to believe everything, though. You shouldn't. But just, pay attention to what you think there's something to. Anyways, any final questions? I'm going to look to see if there's any more clips. I realize we didn't even go through most of them, but there's just so much to say, guys. I realized halfway through this stream today that this should have been 2 streams. Maybe not, though, because the thing is if you really want to watch the full hearing, which I highly recommend that you do, click the link down below and watch the full hearing and on Chris Leto's YouTube channel. And because it doesn't really make sense for me to just give you clips of this that you could watch the whole thing, because it's not the same as like a physics commentary that I give. It's just different, because it's about a subject that I'm not like personally have my own work on, where I can like speak to it in the same way. It's related, but it's not like that. So if you're just this wasn't really supposed to be the stream anyways, where I just show the highlights of the hearing, but I don't know, maybe it should have been, and it should have been too. I have no idea, but I appreciate that you guys were here, and I appreciate everybody hitting the like button, the thumbs up. I'm sorry if this was kind of decoherent. This subject is a tough one, and it's because it is psyops on top of psyops on top of psyops, no matter what. And if it is true, then it's even more advanced. If it's true that there are technological beings around us that have been recovered and even gifted us technology and things like that, then this subject is going to be way harder to navigate, even going forward. And it's not just a matter of trying to uncover what Lockheed Martin is hiding. It's a matter of trying to uncover what beings that are trying to remain hidden, like that are more capable than you. that don't need to go walk through doors and don't need to, fly through space even in a conventional way. It appears. And so, I don't know. Good luck, I guess. I'm interested to see where it goes. I don't know where it goes. So fascinating to me, though. I don't know what your thoughts are. Comment them down below. And if there's anything else that you want me to discuss on this subject, then let me know as well in the comments. And I'm happy to touch on it. It's one I do like to talk about, but it's also one that can be frustrating because it does seem like everybody wants answers. And I think that there are some instances where you can get some answers, but if you can't get firsthand information, then you can't really get answers anyways. But you can get, more convincing answers, I guess, from the government. But, Mick West said, he was like, and so did Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was like, why is it that the craft are always so fuzzy in these videos? And there are videos of not fuzzy craft online and pictures and all kinds of stuff, but we almost always assume them to be false and fakes, even if you believe that this phenomenon exists. Most of them these images are still assumed, at least by me, to not be real. Like, I think that they're just been shared on the internet a lot, and but some of them I do think are real, and I don't think that there is really a way to decipher which ones are and which ones aren't. And I said, and I think I said, I don't even know if I said it or if I was planning on saying it and didn't. What would be convincing of you, other than for them to walk you, like if they walked you into a room filled with, this is what's so frustrating about the subject. If you had grays walk up to your face, little gray alien-looking beings walk right up next to you, you would be like, okay, I know they're real. But then you have Stephen Greer coming in and saying things like, oh yeah, those are actually like manufactured in deep underground bases by elements of our deep state government, and they're used as disinformation tools to fake alien abductions on people, and it's really just like a remote control body. And you're like, I mean, maybe. So the thing is that the only answer that you got is that there's some type of body that's walking up to you that might be a sentient being from another planet, might be a ancient, civilization member, might be a future human, or it might be some engineered biological robot that comes from some deep underground base in Nevada. And it doesn't, it's interesting to know that it's one of those exists potentially, because you see it and you're like, okay, I see it, but I don't know which one it is, because I'm not being flown to some other planet, and I'm not going to the deep underground base and to see them being made, and I'm also not, being invited and told and shown the history of, genetically engineered Atlanteans. Whatever it is that is the answer to this, you could see it in front of your face, not even just be presented with a video. They're like, why aren't there good videos and pictures? Would you believe good videos and pictures if you saw them? I think some people would, some people wouldn't, and like, but should you is the question too. It's like, why is there a specific resolution that at that point, okay, now we think it's true, especially in the age where you can type aliens abducting T-Rex into Midjourney and realistic, and it'll make it like it's not. We have to recognize the limits to our understanding here. We'll probably never know the total totality of the truth on this. And because there are elements that will always be beyond us. And that's true of almost every subject, but it is different with this one because of the goal of you're trying to understand the subject is usually the thing that cannot be achieved. You want to know where they're from. You're never going to know where they're from, probably, unless they told you and they told you the truth, and you still have to take their word for it. They're not going to show you. You're not going to get in a saucer and they'll take you there, probably. Maybe, but probably not. And that sounds terrifying. And if they are biologically manufactured robots that are just used by, intelligence agencies to fake alien invasions and abductions on people for psychological warfare, like Stephen Greer says, then you're not going to know whether or not that one was that or not. You just can't know. So that's what's so tough, and why I say that as much as this is interesting, and it is, and I do think there is a phenomenon here that is a technological beings that are not human as we know it. I don't ever predict to get the answers, at least in this lifetime, as to what is actually going on. And because it seems like there's the incentive structures are on every side is going to prevent the truth from coming out because of everything that I've stated throughout the stream. And so it's a weird subject like that. I can't think of another subject that's like that. And it's that means that as interesting as all this is, and people say, the American people deserve the truth, and do they deserve the truth to know about what their government is doing behind the scenes? Sometimes, yeah. I mean, but also, do you think that some things should remain classified? Probably. So it's a matter of whether or not this is that. I don't know, because we don't know what's being classified. But the main point is, and this is like the thing that's kind of, I think it is actually interesting in and of itself. It's not actually discouraging to me, even though it is. I don't know if it's discouraging or encouraging. Honestly, like, I don't know. That I don't want to say I have no opinions on this. I have feelings about this subject and thoughts, but I don't actually have conclusions on as far as like what's good for us and what's not, because there's so much unpredictability at this point. At least it seems to be the case. And if there's a force at play that's not human, it just changes the game entirely. And you can't really like make accurate. It's much more difficult to make accurate conclusions on it. But it does seem to be like it would be useless to know. That's what I'm saying. It seems like these, and I would be the first to admit that I'm wrong, and I would actually probably want to be wrong on this, because I don't want, it's ideal if we put effort into something that it ends up being useful, but and we're certainly putting effort in now. I mean, the Congress is just having hearings on it, and I'm making streams on it, and you're watching streams on it, and so we're putting effort into it. It would be nice if all of this ends up being a useful thing, but or this, whatever the revelations are of this congressional inquiry ends up being useful to us, but I don't see how that could happen. It seems like even if they told us that there's beings that they've recovered, what are you going to do with that information? And that's a thought that I think we should think about. I don't know what that implies about whether or not, how we handle it ourselves, but I'm just saying, like, don't expect this to be like necessary necessarily like profoundly useful for humanity to be told whatever it is that we end up being told. It's probably not, but I hope I'm wrong. So anyways, definitely I want to watch the clips referencing the holographic principle. I find that to be one of the more compelling physical cosmological descriptions. Yeah, I mean, it was like a quick clip. He just said, well, people talk about the holographic principle. That's all he said. There was no, like, he didn't give an explanation of what that could mean for where these things are from or how they're doing stuff. He just said, you know, he was asked, you said they could be interdimensional, right? And he was like, can you explain that more? And he was like, well, I mean, for one, I hear people in this subject talk about the holographic principle, which is that our reality, 3D reality, is actually a shadow of a 4D reality, essentially. And like, that's all he said. And I will say, as somebody who thinks about dimensions quite a bit, and I think has a handle on what they are, you know, more than most people, that doesn't tell you anything. And I don't think it's actually that useful to tell you the origins of any of these things. Might be useful when you're trying to figure out like how their technology works, but it's not going to give you answers about what's going on, or who they are and what they're doing. I don't think, or where they're from. I don't know if we will ever find out the truth on that. And like, you hear Stephen Greer say things like, you know, oh, our craft, like, they've got beams and pipes and this and that on the outside, and their craft, they're like seamless, and that's how you'll know the difference. And it's like, well, look, you know, like, look at a B-2 bomber. Like, there's no like beams and pipes and stuff on the outside. I'm not saying none of these craft, TR-3B, you know, type of craft that they allegedly have made don't look like that, but I'm just saying they don't have to either. Like, this is not so simple as everybody's made it. It's not, our craft have beams and pipes and rivets and stuff, and their craft are seamless. Really, look at our stealth jets. They are constructed to be seamless. They have to be seamless or near seamless. And, give that a few decades. And then, like I said before, if they walked up to you, a little Paul-looking alien walked up next to you right now, you still wouldn't know what it was. You would just know that something exists that is not human as we know it, and or could be, according to Stephen Greer, and this might be true. I really hope he's wrong on that. I will say I hope he's wrong on this one, because it just makes they really like imply some horrible things, I think, if he's right, that they literally are like bioprinting alien-looking robots, like biological robots, and controlling them. That just sounds so wild to me, but like I've said, Stephen Greer's been right about a lot of things, a lot more than I expected, so I'm not gonna mock the idea too much, but I will say if it's true, that's horrifying. It's so much more horrifying than the existence of real grays, is that the existence of fake ones. And that's, as far as this subject goes, like, that's my hope, is that specific detail that he has shared is not accurate. And I will leave it at that. Thank you, guys. This was interesting. The subject is fascinating. Please watch the full hearing on Chris Leto's channel. I don't know if there would have been any value in me going through more of these clips, to be quite honest. We talked about the things that I think really matter more to this discussion. that are not being said, and I think that's more important. So, just, I don't know. Give your thoughts on this down below, and till next week, peace.